everybody, and welcome to Unlearning Out Loud with Mike and Melissa. And I sure hope this episode goes better than that little walk-in did, because I absolutely froze. And
you're in headlights.
It'll be edited out, but then again, I just outed myself. What is it? Looking behind the third wall, the fourth wall, the fourth wall. We're giving you a little backstage access to the heavy production that goes on for our podcast. So welcome, everybody. How are you today, Melissa? Are you excited to be recording?
I'm always excited to spend time with you, Mike. It's like the highlight of my week.
Yeah, notice that she's so excited to spend time with me that she never actually is in the same room. So it's excitement with boundaries. So we are super excited to have everybody tuning in, listening. We are hoping that you're continuing to share, like, subscribe. You'll hear us say that all the time. Anytime you're getting a new podcast up and off the ground, it takes a good deal of time. We would fully expect that no one will be listening to this, like hot off the presses. It'll be the sort of thing like every podcast I've ever listened to, where I end up going back, as Chris Berman would say, and getting caught up. So please like, subscribe, share, or as I tell everybody else, I mean, I'm going to put it on Facebook. I've got 480 something supposed friends. People that have clicked accept. Or
have you been stalking people on Facebook and you just click because you know somebody in common? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I don't know if I've done that since
like middle school.
The Obama administration.
MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace. That's right. You remember MySpace used to freeze up my computer though. It would crash my Acer, big time. Like it would just. It was. You remember the Acer, the tower, and the giant monitor, and the Acer guy. You get it from like Particle Universe, or no? All right.
Sorry, I wasn't a gamer. I was not a game thing. I don't even know.
Well, you could, but they were horrible. It was just. I don't know what it was for actually at the time. I think I was taking classes, so it was an expensive word processor. But I'll never forget the very first time that I got into a chat room and started arguing with people about. Movies.
No way, you?
I couldn't believe I was typing and somebody was responding. Like it was like earth shattering to me. It sounds ridiculous now, right? But I was always a reasonably good typist. I mean, it was okay.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For some bitch typing class half the time in 8th grade. I was okay. I'm not being dramatic when I say I doubled my typing speed by sitting in those chat rooms in the first 3 months. Because what would happen is those dialogues would right? They'd scan by.
Yep.
And if you had a point to make, there's no way that he's better than Martin Scorsese. Right? And you're typing away frantically. And if you don't hit return fast enough, no one's going to know what you're talking about. Right? There's no way that, Mean Streets is better than Taxi Driver. So like rage typing helped me increase my speed. So to this day, I swear it made a huge difference for me in the doctoral program that you and I were both in. I think I would have panicked on comps if I couldn't have typed as quickly as I could.
Oh my gosh, comps.
Yeah, I know. Not to bring up a bad taste in your mouth, but anyway, so let's get to it. We've got a really interesting. Oh, what?
I want to see the shirt.
Oh,
you got to do the shirt.
All right, so what's with the shirt, as Seinfeld would say. Okay, so I did. As Bugs Bunny would have said, I turned left at Albuquerque on this one instead of a concert shirt. It's a movie shirt.
Okay.
And it's in honor of the fact that the Academy Award nominations were announced today.
Okay.
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to wear one of my favorite movie shirts of all time.
Oh, nicely
Reservoir Dogs. And as you can see, 5 complete strangers, 1 perfect crime. Right? Oh, my God. I'll never forget when I saw that movie. I saw it in the theaters. That was Quentin Tarantino's first movie. It was before Pulp Fiction. And I just sat there with my mouth open going, what?
What did you just watch?
This is the coolest movie I think I've ever seen, at least right up there with Trainspotting. And I'm like, there's good, there's great, there's this great like Venn diagram of cool and great. Okay. And there's a few movies that go right into
wow.
Toolbox. Just man, Harvey Keitel in that movie. Guy was the man. The man. They were all the man. Tim Roth was the man. They were all the man, except for Steve Buscemi. He was a bit of a whiny little.
I'm very impressed. I like the direction of the shirt this week. That's amazing.
I see what you did there with the word direction. So talking about Quentin Tarantino, you drop direction even when you're not trying.
Really, I'm just way out there. I didn't even know it.
4-dimensional chess, I think, is what they call it. You're playing 4-dimensional chess, and I'm not even playing chess.
Know.
Just playing Parcheesi. Just playing Parcheesi. Do you remember Parcheesi?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I do.
It was always in the bottom of the toy bin that no one ever wanted to play. No one ever understood
that and backgammon. What was up with backgammon?
Those were just pieces you threw at your friends,
right?
Like those little checkers, or if you were missing a checker, you grabbed it. I never understood backgammon, and all I remember about the other one was that it said on the box that it was the Royal Game of India. Who knew there was a Royal Game of India? I didn't know this. Maybe
neither.
I don't know. Maybe I was afraid. I just was so culturally out of my element, or I thought I was going to be appropriating Indian culture for playing it as a 7-year-old. So I just stayed away from it. So I've never played it. Come to think of it, I never played Chinese checkers either. So maybe I'm onto something. So anyway, all right. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. This episode is going to be, I was going to say it's probably going to be shorter, but as much as we've already gone on and on, who knows?
It's all good.
But the topic that we're going to be talking about today is so interesting and so not set in stone. Some of the stuff that we're going to talk about are things that, like, the overwhelming amount of evidence, right? The preponderance of evidence really points towards some really clean answers. Or that it's just like, it's really pointing towards a certain thing. Other times we're going to talk about assertions, right? Some ideas that maybe have been rattling around in my Royal Game of India brain, or yours, and we're going to put them out there just to noodle them a little bit and decide whether we want to make them an assertion, and really test our thinking. Because, that's kind of one of the themes of this show, right? Is that gut instinct is often not on, right? It's often not accurate. And when emotions involved and other things are going on. So today's topic, we've said this is not a political podcast, but we are political curious, or I should say, adjunct. We're adjacent. Right? Because we are a show about the human condition, right? For better or worse. And you could make a case that politics really is some version of a manifestation of the human condition, flailing at itself or trying to control itself, or however you want to paint that. So it would be head in the sand to not talk about things that are relevant, without taking positions in terms of left positions, right positions, center positions. Like, that's not what the show's about. But what we do think, what we do here is a lot of people, extremely frustrated, extremely, concerned one way or another, no matter what side they're on. Polling is very strong on that. Currently, that people have a real sense of concern about the other side, about how divided we are, these sorts of things, and those are honest concerns from people of both parties, and very justified, right, based on the information at hand and what we see, et cetera, et cetera. So rather than jump into this, hey, this is what we think this is going on. Instead, what we thought we'd do is introduce something that we've been kind of kicking around a little bit, and we're going to introduce kind of a few of the pillars of the thinking that I know that I've been really fixated on. And instead of just going on then into the details, instead we'd like to solicit input from viewers or listeners, in comments, in emails, in messages, on this time not to just tell us how much you love us, although those are always welcome,
of course,
but I think you might be onto something because, or I don't agree because, and what we'll do is we're going to package up those opinions that we're getting and embed those into the content of a second part of this topic. So we'll do a second episode on this topic, but the voice of people who are out there will be included in this, and we'll be having at least one more guest, because I do think that having a bit of a roundtable on something this consequential would be really super helpful. So,
agreed.
So that's where we're going to go. We'll jump to all that in just one second. But before we do, we do just have to do our normal housekeeping. I mentioned earlier that it is the Academy Award nomination day, and I know of the two of us, I am probably much more excited about that than you are. Am I right?
You are right.
It's
Sorry.
okay. It's okay. People say, what did you get from your parents? My mother gave me a love of film from the time I was watching Cary Grant movies when I was
Okay,
5.
now I do like a good Cary Grant movie. North by Northwest. It's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were doing those things. I remember my mom plunking me down in front of these movies and saying, look at this. This is so cool. This is by Alfred Hitchcock. And look at this. And look how the director's doing this. And I was like 5. And so how do you not develop a love of cinema when that's kind of the upbringing?
Point.
So, she kept me home from school to watch movies. No, I'm just kidding. That never happened.
Oh, no, I've done that.
I like how
to say
it
I've
has her
done that.
hand right. Yeah.
No, but see, I have a husband that treats a theater like a nap place. We go to the movies. It's dark. It's quiet. Right. Exactly. He falls asleep, and so we just don't go to the movies because I don't want to pay for a $20 nap. So
yeah, that's reasonable. That's reasonable.
I don't stay up on my movies.
No, that's okay. You're allowed. And there's been a lot of great writing in television. And so there's a lot to watch. There's a lot to keep up on. But every once in a while, I've got to get back in touch with my first love, which was Ingrid Bergman and movies themselves. Yeah, they say most boys' first love is their mother. I mean, no offense, Mom, but Ingrid Bergman. Sorry. It was her fault because she introduced me to her.
Nice.
So so anyway, so the nominations were out today. I was thrilled because some of the movies and there's still a few that I haven't seen, some that hadn't been put into wide release. And I have to be honest, I'm a little more finicky about going to the theater than I used to be because ever since, the sweet headphones and the big screen TV, and I can kind of have this experience and just don't have to worry about, someone talking next to me in the theater or chomping on popcorn, whatever. But there's certain things that I do have to rush out and see. But so far, I'll give you my favorite probably front runner is One Battle After Another with Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro. Great flick. A huge cast by Paul Thomas Anderson. A fantastic movie, and it is probably the front runner, but. You know what movie got the most nominations? It's the most nominations by a movie in history.
No.
Sinners.
You were talking about Sinners the last time we talked movies.
I was, and it's available currently as we're recording this in January, available on Max. So it's definitely worth it. It's an interesting film. I loved it. I love that part of the country that it's set in the Deep South and Mississippi and Clarksdale. And so it's a really well done movie. And it's not often that a horror movie gets that kind of love.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Not since Silence of the Lambs, I think, that a horror movie, that kind of critics' credibility, right? So anyway, I'll be getting caught up and sending out will you be participating in my bracket challenge this time or?
Sure. If you send me the bracket, I'll throw some things in there. They might be gobbledygook, but sure.
Right. You're like one of the people that picks their NCAA tournament based on jersey colors.
There you go. Yeah, I like the mascot. No, I'm a little bit more into basketball than that, but more than movies. More than movies.
Yeah. So anyway, super excited. And then before I throw it your way, I had one other thing. One thing you and I have talked about adding to the show, and we're going to start doing this, is we like the idea of we're not here to sit and tell you that we know everything about everything and this is what you should know and not know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is more about putting the ball in your court for you to screen it. You decide.
Yep.
And so one of the best ways to do that is we're trying to put stuff out there that if you really pay attention, know thyself, you'll start to see some real hints of evidence of some of the stuff that we talk about. In the episode that we did on attribution bias, if you haven't watched or listened, please do. It's really a good one. We've gotten good feedback on that one. And I had an attribution bias moment today. So I was heading south early this morning. It was still like the sun was coming up. And so coming south on 7th Avenue, the people who live in Phoenix know 7th Avenue South. It's got a suicide lane and don't ask about what those are. It's really not the brightest idea. But they have these huge crosswalk signals now, right? That take up to 7-lane road, and the person can push the button and it sets off what looks like a train crossing. And then, instead of a train, it's just a person that goes walking across a major street, and everybody's giving them grumpy looks, right? So, but they're streets that are high risk, and so they stop. So I'm going south, and it's that weird light. It's kind of not the easiest to see, but I see a guy crossing 7th Avenue, and he's not crossing at that crosswalk. And I thought to myself, I just had a moment. I think I was grumpy because I was going to the gym. I didn't think I really wanted to be, because the complaints I have about the bathrooms and gym, the locker rooms and all that, right? So I probably was grumpy already. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's not smart. Genius here is, like I could hit him. How dumb, and I just rattled through multiple adjectives without even assigning words. It was more of emotional, like, he's got this crosswalk right there. What is he doing? Like, idiot. And what hit me was, of course, it turns out this guy was going to the gym too. But what hit me was, you know what? And I don't know if this is what happened, was, what if this guy, because I've thought to myself many times, I'd feel bad making a whole bunch of people on a 7-lane road stop for me. If I'm looking both ways and I feel comfortable and I can see, I don't want to bring traffic to a halt, right? Especially. Sure. And so what if all that's in this guy's mind is not that he's an idiot, not that he's a careless, whatever. What if it was just a guy trying to be considerate, especially of a guy, guess who the next car that was in his line of sight? Me. So ironically, dude is crossing the street, and if I'm right, he was being considerate of me, and what does he get in return? A bunch of hostile, nasty negative energy. But I caught myself in the moment, because we've been talking about this. Well, not exactly in the moment, just as I was pulling in. And I thought, no, wait a minute. All right. And so I processed it. I thought, well, now again, so well, how Pollyanna of you. I bet he's just an idiot that wandered across the street. Well, maybe. I'll never know, will I? And I'm not going to let my mood determine whether, assign his reason for crossing the street the way he did. So just silly little example, but I think the more we do that sort of thing, the better off it is for us. So anyway, I go to the show here so far. Well, you got anything going on in your life that you wanted to touch base on, other than your excitement about the Academy Awards?
Sure. Well, same as you, I've been thinking about, some of the things that we've been talking about. And one of them is, intent versus impact, that assumption that we can make or get trapped in making. And so something that's been sitting with me has been how quickly we assume intent. And, we hear a comment or we read a post on social media, and, we catch a tone and our brain fills in the rest. Like, they meant that, or they're trying to do this. And we don't even realize that we're doing it unless we put the pause on, right? So same thing. Social media has been really interesting recently. And obviously the algorithms are playing into what we stop and listen to or what we watch. But it's just made me think, okay, I am assuming intent behind somebody posting something that I might think is ridiculous or that I agree with or somewhere in between. And, it as a person that is teaching leadership classes, it is dangerous as far as a habit because it creates conflict that we could have prevented when we assume intent versus impact. So this last few weeks, I've been asking myself do I know this for sure, or am I guessing?
Yeah.
And that's really been something that I've been noodling on. So, that's one thing. And then the other thing that's really interesting, and again, this goes back to social media. So I guess I've been doing too much scrolling because this is it's top of mind for me right now.
Finger right there.
Right.
So,
it's about being certain, and you can call it fake it till you make it, or you can call it whatever you want, but we're wearing certainty like it's a dress code. And even when we aren't sure, we act like we are, because especially right now, being uncertain or being unsure feels pretty risky. Everything else is kind of in flux, and that causes anxiety, and there's risk involved with that. But again, going back to leadership, right, which is kind of where my mind is. We just started classes again for the spring semester. Leadership isn't performative confidence. It really is disciplined thinking. And so it's being willing to say, okay, I'm still learning, even at my age. And I want to make sure that it's done without fear, so that, I am not going to have my tries, my sloppy copies used against me. And giving grace to other people that are in the same situation. So I'm noticing how hard it is in the current climate, and really how necessary it is if we want to have better conversations and better interactions, and really better decisions, and honestly, better communities that we're all living in. So those are the two things that I've been noodling on.
Yeah, in the first one, the idea of checking yourself and wondering about in the dangerous part is, even if you take that step of whoa, slow down, what is it? Do I know intent here? One of the challenges we're up against as human beings is that the confirmation bias, for example, is going to kick in. And confirmation bias may start to say, no, I am slowing myself down here, but I do think I do know his intent. And what's just fascinating about that is because then you start looking for indicators that you're right? That's also our tendency. Along with the with the attribution bias comes confirmation bias. So even though you can potentially make a great attempt to head that off, you got to be aware of second level battles that you have to fight. So really, really interesting points on your part, and you're right about leadership. And so you are so spot on about the responsibility that I think, you're talking about the role that you have in terms of training future leaders or current leaders who are trying to grow their skills, but then also still trying to grow your own skills. And it's funny because, you talk about this idea of uncertainty and embracing that uncertainty. And I almost wonder, I like to run this test all the time in my head about, are we going along with the herd? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think, ask yourself a lot of times, if you are engaged in, things that are hot button topics, whether it's in your profession or whether it's political or whatever, could you sit in a room full of people that are supposedly like-minded and say, let's say it's the number one topic that's a hot button issue for your side, and say, well, hold on, I'm not sure. What kind of stink eye would you get from that room? Just picture it. Right. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you might be on, just to use the political example. You'd be hard pressed to find many spaces where that wouldn't be looked at least as a surprise to hear that, right? Because the expectation is that essentially everyone's saying roughly the same thing,
right?
And that we're searching for our place amongst this social group, and these social norms are really heavily at play. And it's how we just continue to kind of, become a bit of a monolith for that perspective. And so, which is funny because that actually is related. It's not exactly the same, but it's related to the topic that we're going to talk about today.
True.
And the one that we're going to set the table for, which is this idea. And the thing that I'd like to propose is that one of the biggest things we need to unlearn is that we are a divided country. And we need to recognize that we're an actively sorted country. So I'd like to say that and let it soak in, because every time I've said this recently, I get a lot of strange looks from people anyway, and I understand why. Most of the time, you've known me long enough to know I earn most of my strange looks, but this one really throws people for multiple reasons. And I was, I think I mentioned to you before that I was at a round table with a political candidate. Had been saying a lot of great things about, getting people back together and blah, 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 blah. And I made this assertion that essentially, because this candidate had said, we're such a divided country. And I pushed back and said, I don't believe we are divided. And part of what I was thinking about, I didn't say it out loud because I was polite and happy that I was invited. And this person's doing the best they can do. But what I wanted to say is some of what you've been saying over the last hour that you've been talking is part of how we've gotten to that place. Some of the stuff that you're repeating or saying or regurgitating is kind of how we got there. And so this idea that we're not divided, we're actively being sorted is something that I'm still wrapping my head around. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of this. I'm not going to pretend, but because I don't have the ability to monitor every philosopher and every thinker and but this is just what's been fresh in my mind. And I'm sure I'm not saying it as eloquently as maybe some other people might that if they've come up with this in advance, but I believe we're being sorted. And then I think we look around and we say, look how divided we are. And part of how I've come to this is, I think you alluded to several things. I think that I don't think anybody would dispute any of what I'm about to say. And this notion is predicated on this idea that the powers that be, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in the Illuminati. I don't think there's, for people I think the people that are, the elite Illuminati that people think exist, they might exist, but they're on the news tonight. Like they run major corporations.
Sure.
We know exactly who they are. It's not a secret cabal, right? So yes, there are powerful forces, but the powers that be, or the powers that want to be, right? So thinking of political candidates, for example, they choose specific topics to force us into camps, right? We're basically being baited into adopting positions that we haven't even necessarily sometimes even thought through, right? Because it's the topic du jour. And it's simply because we're programmed to automatically oppose the other side, right? So running in the background is, I don't know what I should think about this, but what's the other side think about it? And then I'm going to think the opposite. Or what does my guy on TV, who I watch every single day, or the guy that I listen to on the radio say? And that's what I'm gonna think. And so one of the premises, one of the ahas that I had in regards to this is, what is sometimes known as the facilitator effect. And I know you've facilitated 1,000 meetings and trainings. I remember I used to do collaboration training with schools and school districts. And one of the things we taught people in collaboration training, like how you get people working together, was the idea of the dreaded warm-up activity, the icebreaker, right?
Sure.
Right. Well, one of the tools in our toolbox as facilitators was something that was called, there were multiple, but one of them that maybe a lot of our listeners have been a part of is 4 corners.
Mm-hmm. I've used it.
Yeah. Well, I've used it 1,000 times. And what we do is they're usually harmless, right? They're usually either just to get people talking, or they might be used to prime a conversation,
sure.
Right? Like, what do you think about, where we should go for a school district, and get people thinking, so that way their brains are warmed up to do some activity or whatever. But what I realized, and what I was really thinking about is as the facilitator, I am predetermined where people are going to go a lot of times, right? I remember one of the activities we used to use was in a lineup was, and I was going to highlight their differences, but it was done in an innocuous way, right? Like I was going to say, okay, without using words, make a line of all 50 of you based on where you were born. The people on the furthest right are the furthest on the East Coast, and the people in the farthest west are the farthest West Coast, or Hawaii. There's always some person born in French Ghana or something that would mess everything up for me. But you know what I mean? So essentially, I was creating a sorted line on purpose, right? Now turn and talk, because they had to interact with each other to find their spots, whatever. It was a way to get people engaged. By forcing people into the 4 corners, if people aren't familiar with 4 corners, it's basically, hey, I'm going to ask you a question. Now I'm going to put 4 answers in these 4 corners of this room. Go find the answer that you most closely align to.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And what's never an option. You have to pick one, right? You always have to pick one. And what I think's actually happened, so when you look around the room, it was kind of funny because you knew the puppet master, I forced people into 4 separate corners by the question that I asked, right? And they had a role to decide where they were going to go, but they had to go somewhere, and they had to go now. There was no chance to process it. There's no chance to talk about it. There's no chance to even think about it. You just knee jerk, you're going to that corner. And guess what? Look around you. These are the people that are on the same page as you on this silly little question about who's your favorite character in Willy Wonka or something, right? It's just silly stuff like that. But if you think about the powers that be or the powers that want to be, and those people are essentially playing 2 corners. Right?
Sure.
And I know that when I bring up the question, I can force people into 2 different camps. And they are almost always going to end up in a camp of people that are already like-minded, right? They're going to look around and see others who have thought like them prior, and they're going to go in that corner, right? Into that half. That's a really common, we see that in the 4 corners saying, well, I don't know, where's my friend going? I don't know what.
Exactly. I've never seen this movie, and I'm going to pick this character.
Right. But in the political landscape, it's, well, what are the people watching this news station think?
Right.
How do we know what they think? Because the people that are anchoring the show are going to let me know.
You. Yeah.
Right. Told me what everyone else thinks. And in the meantime, they're all forming their opinion in real time, right? Just like me. But by the end of the day, by God, we're all going to be riled up due to this facilitator effect because I chose the topic. And one of the ones, and again, I've said, we're not here to talk about issues. And what's really interesting is know thyself, right? As soon as I mention this, a lot of our listeners the blood pressure is going to go up, right? They're going to go up and they're going to look for a corner to run to. Hopefully you're in a round room, you're in a synagogue, right? You don't have a corner to go to. But let me give you an example, because I was having a conversation with somebody a while back, and they were talking about, and I'm not making any judgment about their opinion, but they were really, really thinking hard about the debate about gender assignment and, is there such a thing as a gender spectrum? And how can someone that was, that has certain body parts feel like they're a different body part? That's not even possible, and blah, 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 blah. And they were making interesting, well thought out points, right? And I wasn't even debating them. They were actually just kind of, was a bit of a soliloquy because they had just come from a different situation. And they said, why I don't have any hope for us is because if we can't agree on that one simple question of what is a boy and what's a girl, then what hope is there? Boy, did I took that home with me, and I kept thinking about it, and I kept thinking about it, and I kept thinking about it. And, it finally hit me like a ton of bricks. Why is that the definitive question? Why did you get to choose? This is the question that's going to determine whether we're all permanently divided or not, right? And I'm not saying it's not a valid question. I'm not saying it's not an interesting thing to really flush out. But if I come to the table with a totally different question that we all do agree on, right? Why isn't the question murder is bad? All of a sudden, we're all going to be run to the corner where we all agree with each other, except for the serial killers, and we can go arrest them, right? And so, but think about 2 corners if I bring up something like murder is bad, right? Or, rent is too damn high, or I'm just throwing stuff out there, right?
Sure.
Cancer sucks and it should be cured, right? Why, just because someone chose, no, the dividing question, the question that's going to sort us and determine whether we can talk to each other, is whether or not a person born with a certain biological feature identifies as this gender, and that is it. And if you don't agree, then we're divided.
Sure.
Right? Instead of selecting something. And so how do these topics get brought? So what we're going to dive into, that's kind of the first pillar, is this idea of the facilitator effect. And this idea of the people that are picking the topic are the people determining and making sure that we stay fixated on things that we may disagree on, right? And so whether it's, and you can see this every day on 24-hour news, right? Where all of a sudden we're riled up about name it. It's probably something, and a lot of times it'll have nothing to do with anybody's life, whether or not a sports team is going to change their name, or they should have to change their name. Or, I mean, just pick it. Pick the conflict du jour, which ultimately won't really matter nearly as much as some of the other stuff that we could make a list of that we would all agree on. But by God, you can bet they're going to sell advertising time for the next 2 weeks, selling you that the most important thing in the world right now is what that football team's going to call themselves. And anybody who doesn't agree with us on that is on the other side, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes to being binary. You only have the option of you're in or you're out. And
right.
That doesn't really recognize nuance or context or other ways of thinking. And it pushes you into one of those 4 or 2 corners. It pushes you into a corner in terms of what you're able to think about. Because if you've already made the decision that, cancer sucks, there's no other option for you. You go with everything with cancer sucks.
Yeah. Are there any political parties and arguments at the cancer marathon to raise money for cancer? When a bunch of Packers fans go to a Packer game, God bless them. Yeah, they got eliminated this year. I'm not a Packer fan, so I'm just being neutral here. Do you think are any of them looking left and right and asking what side are you on the gender debate? No, they're sharing in this moment. Because the topic that was selected for right now was supporting the football team, and that's our group identity in the moment, right? And I know some people would say, "Well, that's not important." No, it's a thought experiment, right? The idea is that whatever is our preoccupation. So, I'll come back with 2 very important examples. Football's frivolous. I hurt my heart to say that because I love football, and it's the heart of playoff season. But here's 2 examples of what I would say are serious examples that I think really stand to point. First one is, I have told many people that I think the greatest day to have been an American in my lifetime, and I know there's a lot of been a great, I'm not saying but the day that I found most uniquely exciting, I should say, and energizing and unifying was September 12th, 2001. And I say that because on September 12th, 2001, there were no Republicans, there were no Democrats, right? There was no left, there was no right, there was no this or that. And yes, I know that there, that everybody's going to, there were the people that, I get that. But we're talking about the bulk of the people in this country. We're all looking, that we saw an event that we, overwhelmingly, and again, I know, the media will find a handful of people and put them on TV and make it seem like the country was celebrating. It's just not factually accurate, right? We were horrified as a nation, and we all were horrified because we all saw something that had and the way I think of it is there was no context to sort us out. There was no buts. When 2 buildings collapse and thousands of people die on live television, there is no but, right? For most people.
Right.
Right. Yes, we can get into the whys and how do we get that and all that. But in that moment, that one morning, until the hows and the what, right? When you get into, what are we going to do about it? Well, then we start to separate ourselves out again, right? But that isn't, and the one side would look at the other side and gradually start to say, well, you're not American because you don't want to do it our way. And well, you're not American because you don't want to do it right. But the only thing that was uniquely American was the initial response. And we all shared that.
Yes.
Everything is just someone's opinion about how do we handle it, right?
Good point.
So cancer sucks. Well, we can, then guess what? We're going to start to bifurcate on how much funding should we give to the government, right? And all of a sudden we're going to be debating again. But which is great, which is a good thing. It's how we solve problems. But the way we don't end up solving problems is because eventually usually someone that owns television, radio, podcasts, Twitter accounts, you name it, will jump in there and try to carve away this group of people that are emerging and then start trying to label the people, right? Even though they're all people that just think cancer sucks. Right. Just disagreeing. So you can see it happening in live, right? In real time. This thing where we're in a serious, we all agree on this. The other serious example I think I see, and I see it on the news frequently. I've gotten out of watching very much news, other than I go old school with the 30-minute evening news, which really is about 15 with commercials. Just tell me what happened. Don't tell me what to think about it, right? And so, but what do you see on TV most of the time? A lot of times something really horrible will happen. And what do people generally do? All you hear about time and time again are people, I guarantee you, they're card-carrying members of different political parties and jumping in, saving a kid, right? 5 people, I was watching the news last week, and there were like 5 people. Well, it was longer than that. It took like 10 people to hook up, but like 5 people in rushing flood water, holding on to each other so that the 5th person could get out there and save somebody in a car, right? So I find it artificial to say we are some naturally divided country, when in actuality, what I think is that, yes, we're different. We all have different opinions on a lot of different things. But to imply that there's an inherent division, that there's something at our core that is uniquely different, that I am uniquely different than you, that somehow it is nothing more than a product, a byproduct that is packaged and effectively sold, right, to people. And if you're a left coast liberal, I'm just going to use the terms, right? I encourage you to spend a few weeks in the heartland of Ohio or Pennsylvania or Iowa. Yeah, right. Go to and count the number of people that are just like you in terms of what they value, in terms of how they treat each other, in terms of, and they're not monoliths, right? There's a-holes there. There's smart people there. There's nice people there. There's simple people there. Complicated people there. Guess what? Just like the people living on the liberal East, on the West Coast, they just have different opinions when you bring those topics up. And a lot of times those topics that are brought up are quite frequently things that'll never affect them in their own personal lives. And as a matter of fact, they keep us arguing so much that we can't get to the stuff that actually would affect your regular life, right? And then what does everybody do but complain about those damn politicians? They won't take care of stuff that matters. Well, we won't let them, right? Because we're too busy believing in this idea that we're inherently divided, and I fundamentally can't trust these people. And it's sad. It's funny. It's almost like satire, it's almost like this satire, this notion of, hey, I can't trust any of those, but not you. You're okay, right? Like, somebody who has a sister who has a different political opinion. Well, she's all right. It's those other ones that live in Seattle, or those ones that live in.
You know what it makes me think of, Mike? The surveys that they've done. I'm going to take it back to education. Public education is failing across the country, except that people like their local schools,
right?
Because they know them, they know the teachers, they know the leadership, they know that it's a caring place. They have children that have gone there, they've gone there, what have you. So they're all in about the local school. It's all those other schools across the country that are horrible and are doing the wrong thing for kids. So
same thing with
the same
senators.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, you hear the same thing with polling on senators and congressmen. Well, I like mine.
Right.
It's all those numbers that are just jerks.
Yeah.
They're all crooked. But I'm going to run down to the polling station and vote for my guy for sure, because he's all right, right? And so, and everybody, so it's just there's a lot to unpack, right?
Yeah,
and so we can't rabbit hole too much further. But so really, the 4 pillars that we're going to ask people to hear what we've had to say here, and then consider this, kind of to summarize and actually highlight a couple of things I didn't highlight, which is, first of all, this idea that the people who pick the topic pick the teams.
Good point.
And there is, there's one thing that isn't conspiracy theory. It's just a fact. Always follow the money. Follow the money and the power. I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that.
Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, right?
All right. We have got a little Watergate action going there. And it's just a tale as old as time, right? Is follow the money. Who's motivated to do what, and is there major profit being made by this notion of keeping people divided, sorting us? Yes, right. Clearly there is. Yeah. Entire industries. So there's the facilitator effect. There's also this reflexive opposition, right? A lot of times we're not choosing our own opinions. We just look at what the other side is saying and we pick the opposite. And it's instant. I don't know what she said. Well, then that's probably not right. Right. And so, and again, we don't do this on the surface. It's running under the hood, right? The other one is, I like to call it the death of I don't know. And you hit on this earlier, right? This idea of admitting uncertainty is seen as a weakness or a betrayal to your team, right? I say, if I were to walk into a room and say, well, no, wait a minute, what if blah, blah, blah. And maybe I don't even know the answer to it. I probably don't, because guess what? In that conversation, I'm not a scientist or a researcher or a psychologist or a therapist or anybody that's ever really worked with people going through gender identity issues, right? So I'm not an expert, right? So I may have opinions, I have thoughts, but I'm still not an expert. So before I go plant a flag and draw divisions and draw lines and declare to the world, on a piece of that conversation, right? Maybe the idea that someone could just say, well, I'm not sure. Let me think about that. When in actuality, the room is saying, no, you decide now. Right.
Yeah.
And we feel that pressure. We all feel it.
Yeah.
There isn't a political side that doesn't do this. Right. It's the left. It's the right. There is an expectation about what you say, how you say it, when you say it. And again, there's gradients. I'm not saying everybody's the same. Right. However, there are indicators that those gradients are being pushed even further, right? And then lastly, that the agreement archive, right? This idea of the things that we have a laundry list of things, and I'll bring them to the table the next time we talk on this topic. There's a laundry list of things that we agree on, but guess what? They're boring to people and they don't sell ad time, right? So imagine if I'm running a 24-hour news station, I say, guess what? Instead of arguing about whether this local football team should change its name, which is definitely going to keep you tuned in because you're pissed, right? And pissed sells, right?
Yep.
Instead, we're going to talk about the progress that's been made on cancer research to date. And we're going to speak with some of the leading researchers and blah, 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 and the state of the funding and blah, 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 right? Like all this stuff. And guess what? People turn it off, right?
Do you remember the Good News channel?
I do. I remember
the only thing they told was good news, and it was gone in a month.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear the good things. They want to hear the sensational things. They want conflict.
They want to be excited, right? It's the I always feel like I'm saying a bad word when I say titillated, but it's not a bad word. But they want to be titillated for better or worse, right? And sometimes the good stories, they put them on the end of these news stories because I got you through the dark stuff, but then, it does feel good, but I don't want too much of that. But the reality is, it's not a question of, what are we going to talk about then? Because we can't do 2 weeks on the state of cancer research or, 2 weeks on, how are we going to refine criminal statutes so that we can protect children better in the system, right? Mm-hmm. Those require attention. They require effort. They require deep thinking, right? All those things. And so someone might say, well, that's lousy TV. And you know what I'd say? Exactly. Right? That's exactly right. And because of technology, guess what? You can go to the websites, you can watch YouTube streamers, you can see, if you want to follow all that, you can. But what's happened is because we've plunked these TV stations, news stations, podcasts, Twitter feeds, they're all driven by consumption. Mm-hmm. I have to fill that time. Instead of someone saying, do we need this damn channel anymore? Right? Do we need this, the red scroll across the bottom where everything's a breaking news story? The answer is clearly no, right? Because we've been covering, the name change of a football team for 2 weeks, right? Or I remember when CNN covered that lost airplane literally for like 2 months. And they had that same weird British guy. Oh, that's right. We've got flight and it disappeared in the Malaysian Ocean. And I'm like, I know. There's literally no new news since 3 weeks ago. Are you really? Right? So but because we have to fill the void, you're going to fill the void with stuff that sells ad time, right? Right. So, I would assert that one of the best ways to, and I know is to move towards tell me what happened and stop telling me what to think about it and stop beating me to death. But that's another conversation. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But what we're going to add
before we do, I want to throw something else out there, because if we need to unlearn that we're a divided country and recognize that we are a sorted country.
Well, yes, a Freudian slip.
A sorted country. I think it's also important just to consider when we're moving forward with this that there is self-sorting that happens too. People will self-sort And even if they're given the opportunity not to sort themselves, they will do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's part of the whole equation as well.
Well, it's part of the whole theme of this show, right? That there's all these things at play, the biases, right? Our fallacies, all this stuff that are always at play. The question is, and the whole purpose of this show is to get to understand our tendencies better, right? So that we don't get baited into these traps, right? Whether it's silly little traps day to day at work or the big ones like, dividing, considering us, a divided country.
Or company.
Right. Or company that the self-sorting is still an opportunity we've talked about this before. There's entire industries built on leveraging the way the human mind operates, right? Neurologically, socially, right? Way. And it's a field of study, right? And if you don't believe me, go hang out on Madison Avenue and talk to advertising agents, right? We are highly manipulable, right? That's not a conspiracy theory. That's you can get in college where they teach you how to manipulate people. It's called advertising, right? Or political science, or it's not Illuminati stuff, right? You don't need Dr. Langdon from, one of those Dan Jones books, or Tom, to read things on a wall. Like, it's right out in front of everybody. It's the worst kept secret in the world.
Dan Brown, by the way.
Did I say Dan Jones?
You did.
You know why?
No.
Because Dan Jones. Okay, I'll have to tell you, Dan Jones is a British historian who I've been reading. Yeah, I told you I've been on this kick over Britain. I've been reading nonstop. And so I thank you for cleaning that up. And so anyway, we don't need Tom Hanks to come in here and tell us, right, reading the walls, that there are these power structures that are built on this. These are human tendencies that are well researched and well studied and are used every single day. And the funny part is when you sit down and talk to people, they kind of know, but we'll let ourselves get swept up in it because in the end, it's hard to say, wait a minute, I don't know. It's hard to, right? But everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows that. So it's that idea that you've probably heard, I'm sure you have, that technology and communication and media has evolved far faster than the human brain has. Right? We're not biologically wired to navigate this environment, this bombarded, saturated, noisy, loud, right? And everyone that is out there, kind of, with a poker in the fire, to use the term, right? They know exactly how to put us in a position to where we're going to always self-sort, because that's what we do. It's literally an endorphin hit to be on the team with someone, right? And so we'll get more into, because that really leads into stuff we're going to talk about in future episodes. And we'll always link those back to, like, remember we talked about the political thing? But this is an example of what would drive you into self-sorting. Like, why would you do that? It seems so easy. Well, just don't self-sort. Well, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question really becomes, what's the responsibility of the people in power or the people that control these outlets, that control this media? And do they have any responsibility? And I'm not here to talk about that or have that answer. I know there's an idealistic, naive answer, and then there's probably a realistic answer. And what the hell do we do about it? So anyway, so let's wrap this one up. But here's the ask we have for the audience. You've heard us, hopefully. You've formed an opinion. I'm going to bet that there were literally moments where your blood pressure went up, right? Where you're like, whoa, when my group doesn't do that, or whoa, that. But that was a legitimate thing to be worked up about. Or if you did, good, you're a human being, right? Congratulations, you're stuck in this shit show that we're all stuck in right now, right? We can cuss, it's a podcast. Yeah, I do have a question. You can't drink on live TV, right? Like, you can't drink. Can we drink on a podcast? No one can regulate that, right? Could I bring a bottle of scotch?
I guess you could. I mean, you could probably smoke on a live podcast. Why couldn't you drink?
But I don't want to kill myself with cancer on live. Well, watch me die.
Well, all right, then kill your liver.
I knew you were going to say that. But I'm going to bring a bottle of scotch and we'll find out if we get kicked off of the YouTube. I don't know. Okay. I don't think so. I think you do damn near anything you want. So I think it's the least.
I mean, if you can say damn near, I think you could probably have a thing of scotch.
Yeah, let's just test it out. Say a lot of bad words and try a lot of things and see what happens.
I think we'd get a rating slapped on us. I don't know if there's anything else.
That's a badge of honor. So anyway, what we'd like you to do is put a message underneath. And what we're going to ask is you can send us a direct message. You can email us. Any of those ways to contact us. We love comments under the episode postings. However, there is no bigger cesspool than comments. We know our listeners are above that kind of behavior. But we would ask that you would bring the tone and tenor of the program to the comment section. Yeah. If you're gonna say, and if you disagree, and I fully expect some people that are a hell of a lot smarter than I am are going to say I'm full of it on this, and here's where I'm missing the boat, or at least make the point that there's no difference between sorted and divided. Right? One is, and that's a fair point, right? I struggle with it myself. I just think one shows a little purpose, and one seems passive. One seems inherent, right? And one seems external a little bit more. So anyway, put your thoughts. You agree, you disagree, why or why not? And then what we're going to do, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we're going to take those, we're going to synthesize those with the rest of the content that we have, and we'll be doing a second episode with a guest. Between now and that second episode, we have some fun ones coming. So the next one's going to be a blast. I have one of the funniest humans I've ever met in my entire life that will be joining us. And you were talking about getting a rating slapped on us. We might get one from yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's a challenge. I'm just pretty sure that he might control himself just, because he's being a guest, but I kind of hope not. So anyway, he's going to come on and we're going to do some things you need to unlearn about music, bands, songs.
Love it.
Rock stars. It's just going to be fun. And so we'll have a couple other fun ones as well in between all this heavy stuff. So hang with us. Remember, subscribe. We are on iTunes podcast now, Apple Podcasts. When you've arrived when you're on the Apple Podcast. So you can find us everywhere. We're like a flu virus. We'll just turn up everywhere. We're on the sink handles. We're on the countertops. You can't get away from us. So, Melissa, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, great episode. Thanks for having the conversation. I think it's going to be good moving forward. I'm really anxious to hear what the listeners have to say and continue to dive into those 4 pillars of whether we're divided or not divided.
Maybe there's 6 pillars.
Maybe there's
4 where I'm at right now. Maybe there's 2, or Seinfeld say maybe there's none. Who knows? Pillars. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Remember, subscribe, comment. We can't wait to hear what you have to say about this episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.